Destroying a reputation requires four prima facie elements. First, the defendant must make a defamatory statement. This statement must injure the plaintiff's reputation. Second, the statement must be published to a third party. Third, the statement must clearly concern the plaintiff. Finally, the statement must result in legally recognized damages. A statement is defamatory if it lowers the plaintiff's esteem in the community. It must deter third parties from associating with the plaintiff. Opinions are actionable only if they imply underlying defamatory facts. Publication requires intentional or negligent communication to others. It must reach at least one person other than the plaintiff. Every person who repeats or republishes the statement is liable for defamation. This liability applies even if they only repeat the original statement. The plaintiff must prove all four elements to establish a prima facie case. Defamation is categorized based on its form. Libel is defamation recorded in a permanent form. This typically includes written, broadcast, or recorded media. Libel generally presumes general damages. This means specific proof of pecuniary loss is not required for recovery. Slander is spoken or transitory defamation. Slander requires proof of special damages. Special damages mean specific pecuniary loss resulting from the defamation. This requirement applies unless the statement falls into a category of slander per se. Special damages must be economic losses. They cannot be merely emotional distress or general reputational harm. The distinction determines whether the plaintiff must prove specific financial injury. This difference is crucial for pleading and proof requirements in tort law. Slander per se allows presumed damages for spoken statements. These statements must concern four specific categories. First, imputing a serious crime involving moral turpitude is actionable. Second, suggesting the plaintiff has a loathsome disease qualifies. Third, statements negatively affecting the plaintiff's business or professional reputation are included. Fourth, imputing serious sexual misconduct, such as unchastity of a woman, is covered. If a statement is slander per se, the plaintiff does not need to prove special damages. Libel per quod refers to a libelous statement requiring extrinsic facts. These extrinsic facts establish the statement's defamatory meaning. Libel per quod generally requires proof of special damages. This requirement applies unless it falls within one of the slander per se categories. The need for extrinsic facts changes the damage requirements for libel. The First Amendment imposes constitutional limitations on defamation actions. These limits apply when the statement concerns a public figure or a matter of public concern. Public officials must prove the defendant acted with actual malice. Public officials include elected and high-ranking government employees. Actual malice is defined as knowledge that the statement was false. Alternatively, it is reckless disregard as to its truth or falsity. Reckless disregard requires the defendant to have entertained serious doubts. These doubts must concern the truthfulness of the publication. Public figures are either all-purpose or limited-purpose figures. All-purpose figures have pervasive fame or notoriety in all contexts. Limited-purpose figures voluntarily inject themselves into a specific public controversy. The actual malice standard is difficult for plaintiffs to meet. This standard protects robust public debate regarding government actions. Private figures involved in matters of public concern face a lower standard. They must prove the defendant acted with at least negligence regarding the statement's falsity. If the private figure proves only negligence, recovery is limited. Recovery is limited to actual damages. Actual damages compensate for proven injury, including reputational harm. To recover presumed damages or punitive damages, a higher standard applies. The private figure must still meet the standard of proving actual malice. This actual malice standard applies even to private figures seeking enhanced damages. If the statement concerns a purely private matter, states may apply common law rules. Most states still require proof of negligence regarding falsity in these cases. The Gertz decision established this tiered system of fault and damages. At common law, falsity was presumed in defamation cases. The defendant bore the burden of proving the statement's truth. In constitutional defamation cases, the plaintiff must affirmatively prove the statement was false. The level of fault required depends on the plaintiff's status. It also depends on the subject matter of the statement. Public officials and public figures must prove actual malice. Private figures involved in matters of public concern must prove negligence. If the plaintiff fails to prove the requisite level of fault, the defamation fails. This failure occurs regardless of the statement's falsity or resulting harm. The constitutional requirements shift the burden of proof. This shift ensures that only highly culpable speech is penalized. Truth is an absolute defense to any defamation claim. However, the burden of proof for falsity rests on the plaintiff in constitutional cases. Consent by the plaintiff to the publication is also an absolute defense. Privileges shield the defendant from liability entirely. This protection applies even if the statement is defamatory and false. Absolute privileges apply to statements made during judicial proceedings. They also cover statements during legislative debate. Communications between spouses are also absolutely privileged. High-ranking executive officials are granted absolute privilege. This applies to statements made in the course of their official duties. Absolute privileges cannot be defeated by proof of actual malice. They provide complete immunity based on the speaker's status or the context of the communication.
Qualified privileges protect statements made in good faith. They apply when the defendant has a duty or interest in communicating the information. Examples include fair reports of public proceedings. Statements made to police during an investigation are covered. Communications protecting the defendant's or a third party's interests are also included. Qualified privileges are conditional protections. They can be lost entirely if the privilege is abused. Abuse occurs if the defendant acts with actual malice. Abuse also occurs if the statement is published to an excessive number of people. Publishing information outside the scope of the privilege constitutes abuse. The defendant bears the burden of proving the existence of a qualified privilege. Once the privilege is established, the plaintiff must prove the abuse. Compensatory damages are recoverable for actual injury. This includes economic loss, emotional distress, and reputational harm. General damages compensate for non-pecuniary harm. Special damages compensate for specific pecuniary loss. Punitive damages are available only upon proof of actual malice. This requirement applies regardless of the plaintiff's status. It applies when the statement involves a matter of public concern. Retraction statutes are adopted by many states. These statutes may limit the recovery of punitive damages. This limitation applies if the defendant promptly retracts the defamatory statement upon request. Injunctive relief is generally unavailable in defamation cases. This restriction exists due to First Amendment concerns regarding prior restraint. Courts will not typically order a defendant to stop speaking in advance.